Imagine a high-speed manufacturing process running on schedule. Then, without warning, it hits an unyielding obstacle and shatters. In pharmaceutical procurement, this halt is a daily reality. When sourcing active pharmaceutical ingredients, or APIs, teams often prioritize the lowest initial price point. In regulated markets, a competitive quotation carries no value if the API fails to clear product registration or commercial manufacturing requirements. On this digital procurement dashboard, the lowest price path appears clear during early evaluations. But as the project moves toward registration, that path hits a regulatory dead end. An initial price quote is a lagging indicator of true functional viability. To mitigate these downstream risks, API procurement must prioritize regulatory viability, achieved through the verification of specific documentation. Experienced pharmaceutical procurement teams focus on two specific documents: the Drug Master File, or DMF, and the Certificate of Suitability, or CEP. Validation of these documents must occur before the first purchase order is ever issued. Securing them upfront reduces technical risk, commercial risk, and supply chain risk. Integrating DMF and CEP validation at the start of the procurement lifecycle prevents a cascade of downstream failures. This flow map traces the API procurement lifecycle, starting with initial supplier qualification. Supplier X is defined entirely by price, while Supplier Y is supported by a quality management shield. If a supplier lacks regulatory documentation, they are immediately disqualified from regulated markets. Moving forward with an unqualified supplier converts potential budget savings into unrecoverable sunk development costs. Supplier qualification requires a thorough assessment of operational maturity alongside the price quote. A supplier's ability to provide a DMF or CEP demonstrates a verifiable baseline of quality management maturity. These documents provide procurement teams with concrete confidence during the due diligence process. This heavily contrasts with the growing uncertainty of a supplier who promises future compliance but cannot produce documentation immediately. Early verification confirms the supplier is prepared to support complex regulated markets. This readiness acts as a protective filter, keeping unviable options out of the development pipeline. Procurement decisions must support and verify regulatory objectives from the very first day. This chart visualizes project workflows. In a sequential approach, commercial negotiations conclude, and only then is a regulatory request initiated. This creates a severe bottleneck. Because regulatory documentation is requested late, the entire project timeline pauses. Valuable time is lost as the project waits for the supplier to update the required files. The alternative is a parallel workflow, made possible when document verification happens at the start of the project. Confirming document availability during supplier selection allows multiple departments to execute their work concurrently. Quality assurance evaluates analytical methods based on the provided documents. Regulatory affairs prepares the filing strategy without waiting for procurement. Procurement is a multi-departmental dependency, not a siloed purchasing task. Transparent collaboration eliminates the last-minute compliance surprises that derail launch dates. Early document verification acts as the catalyst for faster, more predictable project timelines. This line graph plots the cost of a supplier change across the product lifecycle, highlighting long-term risk exposure. A supplier chosen based only on price carries a deceptively low cost of change during early development. The risk is realized when a chosen supplier's regulatory documentation is found to be incomplete much later in the process. To keep the final product viable on the market, the company is now forced to execute an abrupt API supplier change. In late development, finding a new supplier incurs a steep penalty, requiring repeated formulation trials and stability studies. Post-launch, the cost of a change spikes. Replacing a supplier at this stage requires immense revalidation efforts and can halt market supply. The associated time penalty is extensive, often taking years to clear regulatory reapprovals. This late-stage chaos is avoidable through a proactive documentation approach. Choosing a supplier with the necessary DMF or CEP builds a resilient supply chain from the start. The right supplier selection protects long-term business continuity. Returning to our initial dashboard, we see a system where suppliers are ranked strictly by a single metric: price. Over a product's total life cycle, the lowest initial quotation is rarely the most cost-effective decision. Procurement frameworks should calculate total functional viability. This multivariable approach factors in the costs of delays, revalidation, and cross-functional inefficiencies. A holistic score reveals the true long-term value of a supplier. A reliable supplier provides operational confidence alongside competitive pricing. They offer continuous, long-term regulatory support. In regulated industries, procurement success relies on the ability to deliver a compliant, uninterrupted commercial supply to the market. This moves the priority from a spreadsheet line item to the stability of the entire product lifecycle. Price, quality, regulatory documentation, delivery reliability, long-term partnership. What carries the most weight in your organization?